from around the world. And from CBS News headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather.
Good evening. More pieces were produced today in that puzzle involving an alleged Libyan hit team sent to assassinate American political leaders. And one piece has those killers reportedly in contact with American terrorists. We have reports from Phil Jones and Susan Spencer.
Sources say the alleged hit team is now sitting in Mexico. The composite drawing of the team indicates that 3 of the men are of definite Mideast nationality. One is described as blonde, perhaps an East German, and the nationality of the 5th member is not known by our sources. The informant who has given all the information on this alleged hit team has now reportedly passed several polygraph tests and is being interviewed by psychiatrists someplace outside the United States. Also, sources say that the intelligence reports indicate that the members of this alleged hit team have had previous contact with the Weather Underground terrorist organization here in the United States. Senate Republican leader Howard Baker, himself followed by a car with additional security protection, met with President Reagan today and later indicated his support of the president's actions thus far.
I'm convinced that there is a reason to take these threats seriously and have a high level of concern. I am also convinced that the president is responding to them in a careful and prudent way and appropriately.
Vice President George Bush at the Capitol on other business this afternoon did the unusual. He stopped to answer questions about the Libyan matter, and he was clearly interested in cooling the publicity.
There has been too much, far too much said about Libya, and there have been kind of a lack of discipline in terms of information seeping out, and I just don't want to have anything to say about that.
Sources here in Congress are increasingly concerned over the skepticism that is appearing in the press. And one official indicated today that there will probably be some development within the next few days that will convince all the press and Americans that this is for real. Phil Jones, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
In the House of Representatives late this afternoon, an amendment to a foreign aid bill to condemn Libyan acts of terrorism and to ask the president to review economic and political steps to stop it.
I don't think there's anyone in this room that believes for a moment that American revenue in the hands of this worm, Mr. Gaddafi, has been used to finance international terrorism and indeed potentially even the hit squads that scurry about in our land, if indeed they're here.
But Republicans said with death threats afoot, the situation is too sensitive for Congress to meddle right now. Broomfield of Michigan brought up a letter today from Assistant Secretary of State Clark, which urged that the president's hands not be tied by any such amendment, and which worried about possible retaliation against the 2,000 Americans in Libya should an amendment pass.
I would hope the gentleman would yield to the communication from the White House that this might jeopardize 2,000 people in Libya. There's plenty of time to do this, and it's certainly being considered fully.
But despite the Republican efforts, the amendment, which calls on the president to review ways to stop Libyan terrorism, passed overwhelmingly, 356 to 46. As one observer put it, voting against Gaddafi these days is just like voting for motherhood, apple pie, and the flag all at once. Susan Spencer, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
A 3-day, 7,500-mile hijacking odyssey across the eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East ended tonight. 3 Muslim zealots who commandeered a Libyan jet surrendered and allowed the plane to take its 36 passengers to Cyprus. The plane went this morning from Beirut to Tehran, where the hijackers pressed their demands for an investigation into the disappearance of their Shiite Muslim leader. Then, without warning, the hijackers ordered the jet back to Beirut. And in Havana today, 102 persons held hostage for 30 hours were freed. They boarded 3 Venezuelan planes that were hijacked Monday and returned to Caracas. This ended a harrowing triple hijack that took them to 7 Latin American countries. Several of the passengers commented that the 11 hijackers appeared to have been professionally trained. There was no word on what happened to those hijackers, said to be Venezuelans supporting El Salvador's rebels.
Mrs. Clay, are you all right?
Oh, fine. Sort of.
Constipation? I wish I felt better about my laxative.
You'll feel good about the Overnight Wonder.
Hex-Lax?
Give me your hand. Meet the Overnight Wonder.
This little pill?
That little pill. Or original chocolated tablets. X-Lax gently restores your system's own natural rhythm.
So it is gentle.
You'll feel the difference in the morning. Unflavored pills or chocolated tablets. X-Lax is the Overnight Wonder.
Welcome to the Kmart Gift Gallery, where Kmart proudly presents elegant brushed gowns on sale and in time for the gift-giving holiday season. The selection is tremendous. Long and lovely gowns with alluring ruffles, feminine gowns with delicate lace trim, soft gowns with exquisite embroidery accents, just $5 each. Choose her favorite color, her favorite style. Only $5, and they're available in misses and full-figure sizes. Through Saturday at Kmart, the Christmas saving place.
There is no more dangerous job than working in the nation's mines. While miners account for just 1% of the workforce, 10% of the nation's workplace fatalities involve miners. The toll mounts almost without notice. 460 mining fatalities last year alone. But now, 3 fatal coal mining accidents in Appalachia over 5 days have raised new questions about safety standards. Lem Tucker reports from the scene of Tennessee's worst mining accident since 1911.
The sign outside the Whitwell High School this morning was for the relatives of the 13 men who died yesterday afternoon when a violent explosion ripped through a mine shaft at Tennessee Consolidated's Mine 21. But it could have been for the 8 men who died in an explosion at Atkins Mine number 11 in Beaver Creek, Kentucky on Monday, or for the 3 who died in a shaft cave-in in Burgoo, West Virginia last Thursday. 24 men of Appalachia who do some of the most dangerous work in the world have died doing it in less than a week. Hero Mars? Okay. At Mine 21 in Tennessee today, state and federal inspectors were not yet willing to say the explosion was caused by an unsafe buildup of methane gas, but a spokesman for the state's governor was saying there is strong evidence that that was the case. In the last 2 years, Mine 21 has been cited by safety inspectors for one or another kind of unsafe condition 124 times, but only 3 of those violations were considered very serious. At Atkins in Kentucky, there was talk the other night that maybe unsafe handling of explosives contributed to that accident. That is still to be determined officially, but federal mining records reveal that the mine's operators were cited on 3 separate occasions last year for unsafe handling of explosives. A miner died in one of those accidents. The Elk River mine in West Virginia just opened for production in July of this year. It has already been cited for 3 unsafe electrical conditions. Today in Tennessee, a federal spokesman was asked if the spate of mine accidents indicated that there was a lessening of safety precautions.
What I prefer to say is it's a tragic coincidence that these 3 accidents took place in a single week.
Ironically, the tragedies came just as the administration had been talking about cutting back on mine inspections as a way to save money. Lem Tucker, CBS News, Whitwell, Tennessee.
The House today approved special pricing concessions for that $43 billion Alaska natural gas pipeline, but a Senate opponent threatened to block the bill. By a 233 to 173 vote, the House backed legislation which would shift some of the huge financial risk for the pipeline from investors to gas consumers in more than 40 states. The Senate has passed an identical measure, but Senator Howard Metzenbaum, Democrat of Ohio, said today he will use a technicality and, if need be, filibuster to prevent enactment of that bill.
Hello. I was a dedicated blade shaver till my wife bought me this Remington microscreen shaver because it would shave as close as a blade or your money back. The first microscreen is so thin it shaves incredibly close. The second even closer. And Remington's American made. It costs less. Norelco's imported. It costs much more. I was so impressed, I bought the company. The Remington microscreen shaves as close as a blade, or I'll give you your money back. And the Lady Remington, the perfect gift, also with a money-back guarantee.
Taste of Sprite joins your celebrations. The taste of Lyman mixes right on holiday occasions. Sprite makes brighter holidays. Lyman is the reason. Sprite goes well so many.
Wholesale price inflation at its lowest level since 1977. That was the prediction today, as the government said that energy prices were up, but food prices were down, and inflation overall at the wholesale level eased to an annual rate of 6.3% last month. Analysts now say that wholesale price inflation will be around 7% for the entire year, well below 1980's 11.8%. The Labor Department said last month's wholesale price increase was just 0.5%. The department reported that energy costs rose 0.9%, while food prices dropped 0.5%, thanks chiefly to a bountiful harvest. Well, President Reagan reversed himself on the fired air traffic controllers today. He lifted his own recent 3-year federal ban on hiring them. However, they cannot return to their towers. Leslie Stahl has the story.
Transportation Secretary Drew Lewis said the president was acting out of compassion, but that under no circumstances would the striking air controllers get back their old jobs.
We are repeatedly advised by the dedicated professionals who stayed on the job that they do not want their former co-workers to return. The system is operating safely and efficiently. Relationships between controllers and pilots have never been better. There are fewer operational errors than before the strike. The morale at this point is high, and we believe that allowing the controllers who chose to strike to return to the FAA would be damaging to the safety and efficiency of our air traffic control system.
Assuming they can prove they did not engage in any coercive activities or violence during the strike, the air controllers will be granted some preferential treatment in federal hirings. But if the president thought he'd get an overwhelming response of gratitude from the air controllers, he was mistaken.
Well, it's not a resolve to the problem we have. The problem is getting the air traffic control system back to normal, and offering us jobs in any other government sector is not going to do it. Then offer me a job in my profession. That's what we want.
President Reagan appears to be changing his mind. I wish I had a chance to change my mind. And if I had a chance to change my mind, I might just think about this strike again.
And the head of the Air Controllers Union charged that the decision shows no compassion.
I feel that it's a cruel hoax that the administration has played not only in the American public but the air traffic controllers in saying that they can reapply for a federal job when everybody knows that the budget cuts and that there aren't any jobs existing.
The president's main objective was to mend fences with organized labor, which deplores his economic policies. But a spokesman for the AFL-CIO said, "We are disappointed." And an administration official conceded that with this decision, there will be continued reductions in airline flights until at least next spring. Leslie Stahl, CBS News, the White House.
The executive board of the United Auto Workers, facing up to the deep depression in the domestic auto industry, today decided on a sharp reversal in their policy. The UAW chiefs, meeting in Detroit, gave union bargaining councils permission to renegotiate contracts which do not expire until next September. The move was welcomed by the auto companies, which expected it to clear the way for concessions from union labor. A big part of Detroit's troubles, of course, come from the competition of low-priced imported cars. In Tokyo, United States and Japanese trade representatives opened 2 days of talks which the Americans hope might help adjust a lopsided trade balance, one heavily tilted in Japan's favor. To that end, the Americans are pressing the Japanese to ease some of their import restrictions. That would help people like the Berkeley, California winemaker to whom Gordon Joseph talked.
Kurt Rocca Jr. wants more than just greater access to the Japanese marketplace. He wants it for a made-in-America product that is traditionally Japanese, sake or rice wine. It's like selling ice to the Eskimos.
Yes. I really appreciate your giving us the business buying our sake.
Rocca wishes a lot of other Japanese would give him the business. He says the output of his Berkeley, California plant ranks in quality with the best Japanese-produced sake, but he says it is not competitive in Japan in price, labeling, and distribution. In price because of high Japanese import taxes, 6 times higher than American taxes on Japanese sake. In labeling because Japanese regulations make it impossible for foreign sake brewers to receive better than a second-class grading for their product, the lowest category. Rocca says this means lost sales.
No self-respecting Japanese would ever consider buying a bottle of second-class sake for
a good friend or even to serve at an important party.
Raucus says he is not competitive in distribution because his people have to do it themselves. He says local officials pressured distributors not to handle his sake, telling them it's unpatriotic to cut into Japanese sake sales. The Japanese government so far has shown little sympathy for Raucus' problems. He hopes U.S. government pressure will change that. And meanwhile, maybe fad-conscious Japanese might decide that California sake is in. Gordon Josoloff, CBS News, Tokyo.
Of all the breakfast cereals on the market today, over 100 of them altogether, only a very few are high nutrition cereals. New Buckwheats is one of them. And among the high nutrition cereals, only Buckwheats has a great new touch of honey taste.
Mmm, nice touch.
So, for high nutrition and great taste, new Buckwheats, the only high nutrition cereal with a touch of honey taste.
Genie, opens your doors, America.
We've waited long enough for a Genie garage door opener.
Thank you.
The price is right, and my family can use our Genie every day. Come on, Billy. And I did it myself in just a couple hours. Push once to open and twice to close.
Genie, opens your doors.
Thanks, Genie.
America.
The Senate Committee on Aging estimates that 10% of Medicare bills are fraudulent, a loss of about $3.5 billion a year. And today, as Bill Lynch explains, the committee heard from perhaps the biggest fraud of all.
For much of the 1970s, Dr. Richard Konis ran his cardiology practice from this $450,000 house in suburban Pound Ridge, New York, finding time to write several learned medical books. He also admits he spent a lot of time sending $1.5 million in fraudulent bills to Medicare, Medicaid, and private insurance carriers. After treating one man for minor injuries, Konis billed workman's compensation for 227 office visits and 159 insertions of a tube into the man's heart. He collected over $120,000. In 1974, Konis was convicted for Medicaid fraud, escaping all but 30 days of his 5-year sentence. Soon after, his fraud schemes resumed. Konis confessed to faking his own heart attack 2 years ago using a doctored test and forged reports. As he continued his almost daily tennis lessons, Konis filed disability claims that eventually netted him $250,000 from private insurance and $19,000 from Social Security. The doctor continued playing tennis after moving to Houston and buying this house in a well-heeled suburb. The Yale Clinic hired him and paid a $7,500 salary advance, but he didn't report to work and didn't repay the advance. Konis did work at this hospital, where he stole a Medicaid check for $36,000 and used the money to play the stock market. In September, Konis entered a guilty plea on 67 counts of fraud and could be sentenced next month to a long prison term. Today, he told senators how easy it was to rip off the system.
The system as it exists in the areas I've seen is fairly wide open. I was equally astounded when some of these payments were made. My psychopathology in my case led me to want discovery. And so I deliberately made my forms so outrageous that they begged for discovery.
You've stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe millions of dollars, and you end up with a 30-day sentence that you actually had to serve. That strikes me as being incredible.
Today's hearing was an effort to measure the effectiveness of the 6-year-old Inspector General's office in the Department of Health and Human Services. The committee heard of so much inefficiency and jurisdictional squabbling that Pryor of Arkansas charged the government's biggest civilian spender is policed not by a junkyard dog, but by a pet kitten. Bill Lynch, CBS News, Washington.
With between 20 and 30,000 members, casino dealers are the largest single employment group in Nevada. You could call that a taxing business, but the Internal Revenue Service says that's just the problem, that dealers have failed to report sizable income. The IRS says the dealers have until January 1st to change all that. And as Jerry Bowen reports, the chips are down.
For years, one of the biggest games in Las Vegas has centered on the betting chips, the tokens, tokes for short, not the tokens won or lost by the players at craps or blackjack, but the tokens the players give to or bet for a dealer.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank
It's estimated the dealers earn an extra $14 to $150 a day in tokes, and for years, much of it has never been reported as income. $1 billion worth, according to the IRS, for Nevada's entire gaming industry over the past 8 years.
The tokes are our livelihood. It's the main reason that I'm a dealer. It's what I bring home to support my family with.
Blackjack dealer Rex Kidd supports his wife and children on a base salary of $9,000 a year and tokes. He won't say how much he earns in tokens. He will say he resents the IRS move to tax all his tip income, arguing that tokes aren't tips at all.
The toke that I get is not taxable. It is a gift.
Dealers who share that view rallied in Las Vegas today, angered by the IRS ruling that gift tax laws don't apply in their case, suspicious of an IRS deal that would grant them amnesty for tip income not reported in the past, if they'll sign a pledge to report all toke income in the future. IRS officials say it's the best deal the dealers can expect.
Our commitment is that all dealers that do not accept our offer and come into current compliance will be examined within the near future.
What is at stake here, according to the IRS, is $50 million a year in taxes not now being collected. And while there is talk of a court fight by the dealers recognize that the odds are not in their favor in a game where the IRS makes the rules. Jerry Bowen, CBS News, Las Vegas.
Soviet dissident Andrei Sakharov and his wife, living in internal exile in Gorky, are reported today to have won their latest battle with the Kremlin. Their daughter-in-law will be allowed to come to the United States to be with her husband. Don McNeil in Moscow has the details.
Returning to her apartment after being summoned suddenly to the headquarters of the KGB, the Soviet secret police, Lisa Alexeyeva said that she was told that she could leave the country and that her father-in-law, Andrei Sakharov, and his wife, Yelena Bonner, had ended their 17-day hunger strike on her behalf yesterday when they were given the news. When pressed about whether she thought the KGB was telling the truth, Lisa Alexeyeva said, "I don't think they would deceive me so directly." She said that the KGB had warned her, however, that the promptness of her departure depended on her limiting contacts with foreigners, especially with Western correspondents. In Boston, Alexei Semyonov, Sakharov's stepson and the husband of Lisa Alexeyeva in a marriage by proxy, talked with reporters and well-wishers about the news, which he welcomed. However, he said he did not trust the source, that is, the KGB, and he was also unsure of the Sakharov situation.
For 6 days now, we didn't have any direct news from our parents. We've been kept incommunicado. No friend or relative was allowed to visit them. And they actually disappeared. And they are still disappeared people.
It appears that the Soviet government may have taken the only way out of its dilemma it could find. The leaders did not want the death of Sakharov on their hands, and Western scientists tell us they were afraid to put him out of the country because, as father of the Soviet hydrogen bomb, they thought he could still pass on nuclear secrets to the West. The only way out, then, is to let Lisa Alexeyeva go, even though they claim her marriage is illegal. Don McNeil, CBS News, Moscow.
The NATO defense ministers ended their two-day meeting in Brussels today, but without issuing a communique. The reason was differences between Greece and Turkey, fellow members of the alliance, but longtime enemies. This was the first time in NATO's 32 years that a communique was not released.
Last night, I did something I never thought I'd do. I ironed my negligee with the Silverstone iron by Hamilton Beach. It has a super sensitive surface of DuPont Silverstone that assures you never to stick or snag, no matter how delicate the fabric. It's so light, so sleek it reduces friction. So even my silks look pretty and wrinkle-free. The Silverstone iron exclusively by Hamilton Beach. It's as sensitive as you are.
Here in Emilia, to make a good wine, you need a blend of Marani grapes, Salamino, Maestri, and Monterico. But to make a great wine, you need the missing grape, the Lancelota, Riunite adds the Lancelot because only Riunite can grow it to perfection. This missing grape makes Riunite the best-selling imported wine in America. Pure and natural Riunite, also in white and rosé. If you haven't tried Riunite, you don't know what you're missing.
The Christmas story is stunning in its simplicity. It is reenacted by children every year. But it reports a miracle, and the possibilities for its telling are limitless. There is something of Hollywood and something of Broadway in a Christmas production that opened in Southern California today. But as Gary Shepard reports from Garden Grove, it is still the Christmas story.
It is being billed as the largest Christmas pageant in the nation, with a cast of nearly 400 people, plus a dozen sheep, 2 donkeys, and 3 camels. Not to mention a production staff with credits that include Broadway, Walt Disney, and the halftime show at the Super Bowl. But then the Crystal Cathedral, Southern California's $20 million, 3,000-seat landmark, has never been known for understatement. There are no fewer than 6 soundtracks being used to help tell the story of the birth of Christ, not to mention huge rear projection screens, more than 600 lights operated by a computer, and a nativity scene 40 feet tall. When he isn't doing this, the narrator doubles as the voice of Tony the Tiger on television breakfast cereal commercials. To put it mildly, this is not your typical church Christmas pageant.
We have some 24 walkie-talkies involved in the production, plus a ClearComm or headset system that involves some 15 to 20 operators. So the communications between all these aspects is, I would say, much more involved in a Broadway show.
The Reverend Robert Schuler, senior pastor at the cathedral, compares the production to the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II.
It's never been possible before in any church, cathedral, or auditorium in the world to tell the story of the birth of Christ in the scale that we're telling it tonight, because you need a place with a 100-foot ceiling to do the job.
So move over, Radio City Music Hall. You have a rival out here in the West. They've already sold 32,000 tickets to this year's pageant, and the orders are still pouring in. Visitors will have no trouble finding the place. All they have to do is look for the camels parked out front. Gary Shepard, CBS News, Los Angeles.
And that's the CBS Evening News for this Wednesday. Dan Rather reporting from New York. Good night.
I'm cooking for the world's most exciting man. So what I make has to be terrific. That's why I depend on Ore-Ida French fries. Because I know every batch will taste great. When I make Ore-Ida fries, why, he just flies home. That's him now.
Smells good.
Ore-Ida French fries.
All right, Lois, you're superb.
Elegance at your fingertips. It puts a smile on everyone's lips. Lippy class.
Put a smile on the lips of everyone on your gift list this season with the style and elegance of a gift from Libby Glass. Look for our beautiful holiday packages wherever you shop. Then give the gift that says something beautiful to people about you.
Elegance at your fingertips. It puts a smile on everyone's lips. Lippy Glass.
From around the world and from CBS News headquarters in New York, this has been the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather. This is CBS.
Officials trying to find out what caused an explosion that killed 13 coal miners, and the towns around the mine cope with the tragedy. Details coming up next on Eyewitness News. Bob Evans down on the farm.
You ever watch Bob Evans' farm sausage cooking up? It's so plump and tender you can almost see how good it's going to taste. That's because Bob Evans sausage is made with the best cuts of lean meat, hams and tenderloins included. And we limit the fats so our Bob Evans sausage won't disappear in your frying pan.